Welcome to the Businessmen and Women of Color podcast. I am your host, Ann Alston, and it is my pleasure to bring quality programs to all of you. I am so excited to be here once again with another amazing speaker who's going to be talking about universities and sharing his experience in the colleges, and I can't wait to talk to him. So please be sure to stay tuned and listen to this podcast as well as visit all the pages and listen to all the podcasts so that you can hear all the good information from many of the experts that's on this platform. So take advantage of this unique opportunity. Just in case you did not know, the purpose of the Businessmen and Women of Color podcast is to not only share our industry information, but we're also encouraging career seekers and working professionals to enter their line of work. So that's why it's important to listen to the podcast, because there is some information that could be beneficial to you. We will also like to take a moment to thank our corporate partners and sponsors, a family of authors, Butler Armstead Consulting Solution, Human Resource Learning Center, J&F Enterprises, and Women Offering Wealth, along with many of our other business partners and sponsors that's helping to make this event a success. So today we're going to have a really interesting speaker today that works in the universities, who's going to talk about some of his experience there and the efforts that he is doing to empower people and being a coach. And that is Marcus Taylor. As an educator by trade, Marcus Taylor has devoted his professional career to advocating on the behalf of students from marginalized and undeserved backgrounds. As a self-identified first-generation college graduate, Marcus recognized the value of authenticity and the space needed for individuals to express themselves openly without fear and judgment. He currently holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in English from Wayne State University, a Master's of Art degree in Higher Education Student Affairs from Eastern Michigan University, and he currently serves as a student success coach at the University of Minnesota Rochester, and he credits many of his years of advising as a coach as a catalyst for authentic expression and encourages others to see their richness in their words and most of all their story. So I would like to welcome Marcus to the podcast. Welcome, Marcus.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me. And looking forward to connecting with everyone. And again, I'm so appreciative about this opportunity. So thank you.
Okay. Well, tell me about your history and what led you to go to college and what was your passion behind it.
For sure. So, make a long story short, I was actually a student that was conditionally admitted to Wayne State University, which is a school located in Detroit, Michigan. And kind of going off of that, I wasn't the best student in high school. I actually graduated, if you want to say it that way, with under a 2.0 GPA. So options for me to pursue higher education outside of a community college were very few and far between. So I got admitted into Wayne State University through a conditionally admitted program. At the time, it was called the Division of Community Education, DCE for short, and really sought out that opportunity because I had aspirations to go into journalism, and was admitted into that program and had the opportunity to, work closely with my advisors and things like that. Hence why I'm an advisor today. And after that, I actually had the opportunity to mentor in their program. So students who were just like me, first generation students who were the first in their family to attend college, and sort of passing along some of that same advice to those same students who were like me before. So did that, and graduated with an English degree back in 2009, I believe. Seems like it was so long ago, but it's not that long ago.
Okay.
And then, here I am, and this would, kind of led me to higher education, working in the field because there was so many different things. But the foundation of that was me being a peer mentor.
So, okay, so you started off doing the mentorship program, and then what I'm hearing in your conversation is that you went into English. What was some of the defining moments of why you wanted to go into English? Because when I'm hearing the mentoring, then I'm hearing you're doing a degree in English. Was there something specific about English that you thought that would help you in your career at that point?
For sure, that's a really good question. I probably should have prefaced that. Well, I think I did kind of mention it, but I initially wanted to go to college to pursue a degree in journalism, and in fact, in high school, I actually had the opportunity to write for both the school newspaper and also a weekly newspaper, one of the oldest weekly newspapers, African American publications in the United States, which is the Michigan Chronicle. So actually did that during my senior year of high school. I wrote about things I was interested in, music to be exact. I was a big hip hop head back in the day, listening to Jay-Z, Nas, things like that. Music came out in my era. And English was more or less, to kind of get to your question exactly, was something that was, closely related to journalism. Just given my background in writing, I've always been fascinated by the idea of spoken word or written word to be exact, and transition into English just for the fact that I love writing. Has always been my first passion, and the mentoring just happened to occur organically.
Okay. Now, do you plan to write a book one day because you have such a passion in writing?
Another great question.
Well, you know, I had to
That is,
ask. You mean you have a passion in writing, so of course you got to have a book, right?
yeah, no, for sure, and that's a really great question. In the past, it has been something I've thought about, may revisit again. I know when I was in high school and the early part of my, coming into college, it was something I was actively pursuing by way of like interviewing authors and things like that. People kind of giving me advice, but um, I haven't thought of the right thing to write about. I mean, there are so many different things that interest me, like music, like mentoring, like education, things like that. But I think that for me at this point, blogging and, writing articles here and there is something that uh, revisiting that passion for writing. But I don't know. That's a really good question.
Okay. Well, that's okay
Got to stump
because
me
hopefully by
there.
the end, well, you know what? That's okay because hopefully by the end of this podcast, you'll have a really good idea of what to write about. So I want to ask you about your success coaching that you do at the university now. Tell us a little bit about what exactly you do there and what type of coaching do you provide?
For sure, for sure. So currently at the University of Minnesota Rochester, as you mentioned, I serve as a student success coach, and the logistics of that role is I have the opportunity to advise students from the time that they come in until the time that they graduate. So I started that role in 2013, and coincidentally, my students that I advise are actually going to be graduating in the next couple of weeks in May with degrees in health sciences. So the students that I directly advise are ones who have aspirations to go on to different areas of healthcare, whether it be physician, dentist, pharmacist, physical therapist or PT, occupational therapist, nursing, you name it. And giving them that foundation as to what are some of the things they need to do to prepare. Because again, like I've worked with these students from the time that they came in or entered our university to now their upcoming graduation. But in addition to that, I also do a variety of things such as teaching our university experience course, which I've done for the past 3 years, and um, just doing different things. I like to think of myself as a resource in the sense of I'm doing career advising, but I'm also doing academic advising. Career advising meaning helping them with their resumes, cover letters, things like that, mock interviews, but then on the academic side, making sure that they're taking the classes that they need to graduate, and then ultimately, if the opportunity presents itself for them to go on to the professional and graduate schools of their choosing or desire.
Okay. So one of the questions I want to ask you pertaining to that is, in my mind, I know that students are coming to either an academic counselor or a career coach within the university to help them. I
Mm-hmm.
just want, just from your perspective, of how important that is when you are going into any college at any age. How important is that?
It's definitely key. Going back to what I said earlier about my advisor, who played a significant role in my life. Without this individual or individuals, I wouldn't be here talking to you today because they made it a priority to make sure I was taking classes both that allow me to graduate, and then number two, helping me to identify majors that were aligned with my values at the time. So it's definitely critical to establish a relationship with that person. I know on our campus, with it being sort of specialized, I am that single point person because on my own experience, I had to talk to an academic advisor and then go to a separate office and talk to a career advisor. And sometimes that information can be a little disconnected. So in my role, holistically advising the students, I can sort of see where their academic goals are and then see where their career goals are and, sort of meet them in the middle, sort of bridge the gap, if you will. I can't think of anything else to say, but sort of bridge that gap and kind of put the two together. But it's super important to have that person to help you navigate just the entire university experience, or in that case, for students who are in community colleges, just the whole higher education experience in general.
Okay. Yeah, because one of the things I definitely want to find out, particularly and yeah, I know you can only speak for the university that you work for. I'm trying to get a sense, what is the percentage of students, or maybe an average of students, that actually utilize the service in the college, just from your own perspective, because that's one of the things that I feel that is critical to the learning of a new student, to be able to leverage not only the academic counselor but also the career counselor as well. And I'm trying to get an idea in terms of what you experience of the number or the percentage of students that's actually using the service.
Yeah, and that's a really good question, and of course, a challenging question to answer with other places. I just know in the three universities that I've worked at, University of Michigan, Eastern Michigan, and then now the University of Minnesota, Rochester, it really depends on the colleges because in certain colleges they're required, or certain departments rather, they require their students to meet with their advisor once in the semester, whether it be at the early part, sort of a get to know you meet and greet, and then in the other part, registration, and then finally graduation. So for me, having served in the role, or serving in the role currently as a student success coach, I not only have the opportunity to meet the students in some of those required meetings, but then also because they know who I am, they come to me quite frequently, and my percentage rate, or rather the office's percentage rate with the other coaches and things like that, we have very high contact with our students. So at other universities where the caseload, an advisor's caseload may be 300 or 400 students, that could be a challenge because it's kind of hard to meet with 300 or 400 students in a semester, which a semester is only 3 to 4 months. So that can pose a challenge as well, versus where we are, our university isn't as big. So we do have the opportunity to provide that high touch contact and advising.
Okay, fabulous. Okay, so I want to turn the conversation to another part of your bio where you're talking about how you advocate on behalf of students from marginalized and undeserved backgrounds. Can you talk to me about what that really means in terms of your definition and what type of advocacy that you provide for these students?
For sure, and that's a really good question. So when I mention students from marginalized or underserved backgrounds, I just think of one, selfishly, thinking of students like myself who was the first of my immediate family to attend college, and understanding that I didn't necessarily have the capital. Like my mom, for instance, she would give me all of these resources, but resources such as like scholarships and things like that, and she meant well in what she was doing. But at the end of the day, there was only so much that she could provide, with her not having that background in higher education. So what I mean by that is sort of leveraging those resources in a sense of who can you go to on a college campus for your needs, and also being able to gain that capital. It's capital in the sense of like your social capital. I'll give you a good example. So I mentioned that I advise students who have aspirations to become physicians, dentists, so on and so forth. And what I noticed coming in is that some of my students' parents were actually physicians, dentists, or pharmacists, and things like that. So they came in already having that capital, knowing what it means to go into these desired career professions. And, working with these students and understanding, hey, not everybody has that opportunity to know a dentist. Like, I know a dentist because I have a dentist, right? Um, so what I've done most recently is, as students have self-identified, whether they be first generation or I'm just using some of the, non-visible identities, because you can't look at someone, hey, you're the first of your family to go to
Right.
college.
Right.
But also understanding that people who are coming from underrepresented backgrounds, whether it be racial, ethnic, African American, some of the other marginalized backgrounds, Hispanic, so on and so forth, understanding that not everybody has the same experience. You can't put everybody in one category. Nobody has a homogenized experience, so to speak. So looking at that and just being that source to help them to navigate what the university has in terms of like resources, and just being that capital, and also just being that listening ear. I mean, there are more things that I've done on the as far as like initiatives and programs that we've looked at and developed, but I'd say in short, just being able to help them to navigate things, what it means to be a student at the University of Minnesota, or in previous places where I've been at, what does it mean to be a student at the University of Michigan or Eastern Michigan or Wayne State. So really just being a resource to them, if I were to summarize everything I
Okay.
said.
Okay. So with all that effort that you put in what you just said, what has been the outcome? Have you had any type of success stories where someone actually came back to you and say, you did this for me and it was fabulous? Can you give us an example of that?
Oh my goodness, yeah, that's a really good question. I'm gonna try not to get too emotional
You
because
have to get emotional because it's one of those things because I mean we advocate all the time for a lot of things. We're all doing something to help someone else, but we don't really know the measurement of our impact until someone comes back to us and say, "This is what you've done for me." And I really want to know more about how the students took to what you've done.
For sure. Well, I'll try to give you a couple examples, but try to be brief in those examples. So one of the things that I can think of, and I just spoke to this student recently, is a student I worked with back at Eastern Michigan University, and about maybe 3 years ago, got an email from a student because I check my Eastern email often just to kind of see how everybody's doing. And I got an email from a student saying, hey, I'm about to graduate with my degree in social work, and I wanted to thank you for all the time that you invested into me. Like, you really helped me to get through my first semester in college, because the student, unfortunately at the time, was one who was on academic probation. And we worked with that student, or I met with the student biweekly and helped them to navigate the university, but also talk about their goals, what were their short-term goals versus their long-term goals. So anyway, got this email, and I was very surprised to hear from this student. And they brought up, conversations that we had had like 3 or 4 years prior, and it really resonated with the student that here I was, and at the time, I think this was like 2011, 2012. This is my first semester in grad school, and I hadn't worked with students in about roughly 2 or 3 years, coming from my mentoring role. And I really had doubts, like, can I still work with students again? Am I good at this? Do I need to sharpen my skills? And to get this email from the student telling me how much they appreciated the time that I invested into them really meant a lot. And there's also a student that I just spoke to as recently a few days ago, because we just wanted to kind of check in and see how the student was doing, and they're enjoying their career in social work right now. And it's really good to come full circle. And the most recent thing I can think of is I mentioned earlier that some of my students will be graduating. Well, not some, but all of them will be graduating
Wow, so they're going to be
in the
right
next
there.
couple. Yeah. So all of them are graduating the same 75 or so students I started out with in 2013. They'll be graduating in a couple of weeks. I think it's the day before Mother's Day, I believe. But they're doing these presentations called capstone presentations. And what that is a culmination of their experiences that they've done during their senior year. So some of them are like studying abroad. Some of them are doing different minors, things like that. But one story that really stands out is a student who is going to be doing a program called the AmeriCorps program, which is sort of like a domesticated version of the Peace Corps, where you go out into the community, things like that, working with different organizations. And the student had no idea what the AmeriCorps program was. And I kind of shared with them my experience serving as an AmeriCorps Vista after graduating undergrad. And the student disclosed at that moment, during their presentation, that they'll be doing that. They thanked me for it. And that was like really resonated with me, because this is another student who faced a great deal of challenges over the last 3 or 4 years. And seeing that, I was trying not to get emotional. I was like, let me just be cool, whatever.
Okay.
But hearing that, but also the students that have gone on to graduate school, they're disclosing like, hey, I just got admitted into medical school. Thank you for all of your work and support. I really appreciate that. And I'm like, no, you did the work. I wasn't the one taking organic chemistry and physics. That was you.
Mm-hmm.
So some of those things, and really the ones that the one that I mentioned about serving students from marginalized backgrounds. I really am very passionate about helping students who are first generation or first in their family to go to college. And one of my students who graduated this past December, she got accepted in a nursing school, and we were super close. And the student shared some things with me as far as like being the first in their family to attend college, some of the challenges they faced, and what that looked like. And now this student is at the University of Alabama studying nursing in their Master of Nursing program. So it's like those little stories. I mean, I can go on for days about some of the things that I've
Yeah. But it's
received,
fan,
but
but
those
you
are the ones
feel
that stand in
good.
mind.
But you feel good when it happens. And
Yeah,
see
yeah.
that's the thing. When you do stuff like that, it comes back to you tenfold. And like you said, you're the one that's taking the classes. You actually motivated them to fulfill a purpose or fulfill what they needed to do the class. I know how I felt going to college, being the first one in my family to go to college, complete college, and not only get a degree, a bachelor's degree, but go on to get a dual master's degree and go on. And it's a great feeling. And that's why I'm always reaching back to pull somebody forward to say, you know what, I had a really good support system, because everybody doesn't have a good support system,
Mm-hmm.
and you happen to be that support system that they need. Another point that I wanted to make to add to what you were saying is that it is incredibly helpful to have a career coach or to have a academic counselor. If you're not doing it in the school, definitely come out of your pocket for a few dollars and hire a career coach. Hello, I'm one of them, to help you make those decisions, because I get too many phone calls from people who I'm mentoring that says I'm already in college and I have no clue what I'm going to be doing when I come out of in the end, which is not a huge problem. But a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times what they do is they get into the wrong degree program from the beginning because they did not ask the questions, or they didn't get the right information from the right person. And so it's incredibly important that we take a step back and say, okay, where am I going to end up in the end? What am I going to do with this degree? How am I going to get support when I get stuck? And make a plan that you can follow and you can trust. And you pretty much gave them that platform, and I want to applaud you for that.
Most definitely. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you sharing your story, because I think back to my own experience. And when you think about a person who has an English degree, you think of, oh, this person's going to be a teacher, oh, this person's going to be a writer. And I could have been any of those things, but that's not where my passion was. And I like to think that my advisors and the people who invested time into me sort of encouraged me to follow my passion. And, having a liberal arts degree, it isn't one that's pre-professional, like a business degree or a law degree or engineering degree, something like that, where you can't directly apply what you're doing to an actual job. So I say all this to say that the people who really invested time into me, whether it been an advisor, whether it been a mentor, they really encouraged me to follow my passion. That's where um, I pride myself in doing those same things for my students, because not all of them are going to go to medical school or dental school. But I encourage them to, like, let your passion guide you. And, hearing my students who are doing things that are a little, I won't say untraditional, but, they're following their passion, like in the AmeriCorps program. And that's going to open up some doors for them. And some of those different careers that people don't necessarily know about, especially in the health industry.
Okay.
So, yeah, I
So
appreciate
what?
you sharing that.
No problem. I love sharing my story because I have a bad part of my story and then I have a good part of my story. But if you
Mm-hmm.
put the two together, it makes who I am today, and I will not change it for the world, regardless of what happened over the course of my whole entire lifetime, because I get to do what I'm doing right now, which is meeting really great people and sharing information. So, what are some of the other initiatives are you working on outside of the advocation? Are you doing any kind of speaking at different places to kind of further and talk about what you are passionate about?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, some of the most recent things that I've done have been presented at different conferences. So, the most recent conference I presented at was in Raleigh, North Carolina. I believe the organization was the American Association for Blacks in Higher Education. And what I've really been focused on is looking at the transition for first generation college graduates into the professional world, specifically in higher education. And I really became interested in that because, one, of my own lived experience, being a first generation now college graduate, a two-time first generation college graduate, and I noticed that some of the capital that I was seeking out, as an undergrad, and some of the help and things like that, it still wasn't there. So I really am now focused on looking at ways to support first generation professionals, more so in education, but I'm also looking at what does that look like in other fields such as business and things like that, because we get into these arenas and we get into the workforce, and sometimes they sort of look at it as like a one size fit all, like, oh, you know, this is how you should be. You should sort of conform, if you will. But not everybody um, has that willingness to conform. I know you have to conform to a certain degree, but people aren't able to be their authentic and individual selves, I believe, in some of these places. And I'm probably more so talking about education because that's where I currently work, but I also have spoken to people in other fields where they aren't able to be their authentic selves, so to speak. But getting back to other things that I've done, more so on the education side of things, looking at, again, first generation students, that's something I'm very passionate about. I've conducted workshops on how students can build capital or being successful during their first semester of college, because I recognize, you know, being a mentor, being an advisor, being a coach, some of the different arenas that I worked at in higher education, like, wow, like I really have an understanding of what it takes to be successful, but also catering it to students from first generation backgrounds, but also understanding the needs of those different students as well. Because again, we don't want to group them in one category because everybody has different needs as students. Aside from that, I mean, I really have been focusing on those things. And I know in the past I've spoken about like different health careers, because having served as a pre-health advisor for the better part of 4 years, I now know what to tell a student who is in high school. This is what you need to do to learn about dentistry or pharmacy. And I'm also become aware of like some of the different enrichment programs that students can seek out, because my students right now are taking advantage of those enrichment programs. So to answer your question, or to be brief, I know I'm kind of long-winded answer right there.
No, it's quite all right. Go ahead.
No, but to be brief, to summarize everything that I've said, really looking at ways to leverage those resources. And what I mean by that, providing students with that capital, if you will.
Right,
So
right.
leveraging resources and things like that, but also
Mhm.
being intentional about my own lived experience as a first generation student,
Mhm.
now college graduate, and how can you support
Right.
uh, people in that area.
Okay, and then that leads to part of, you actually answered part of the last question, which is from the people who are listening to your podcast and the people who are participating, what do you need from them to help you further your cause? I know part of it is trying to reach those students that you need to do, especially if they're first generation college students. But what else do you need in order to thrive?
That's a really good question. I suppose one thing that I need, and I don't mean need in a way like please give this to me, but really being able to for people to provide a space where people can be their authentic selves. And what I mean by that, and having that need or desire that I want, is for the educators who might be listening. How could I be of service to you? Because I recognize, again, having served as a pre-health advisor for the last 4 or so years, and that's something I didn't have knowledge about, is given the fact that I was an English major. Healthcare, there's going to be a big boom of careers. And what I mean by that, the baby boomers are going to be retiring soon. And seeing some of these different careers, and they don't necessarily have to be like patient care careers. I've been mentioning like dentistry, physician assistant, physical therapist, so on and so forth. But there's so many different careers in healthcare that people don't necessarily know about, like a medical lab scientist, for instance, a podiatrist, things like that. And I want people to be aware, not just young people, but also adults as well. Here are some of the careers that are out there for you to seek out in the healthcare industry. What can I do to support you in that regard? But also going back to my desire to help first generation students and other students as well from marginalized or underserved backgrounds. What can we do to leverage resources for you? What are some enrichment programs that we can seek out that are aligned with your values or your interests or also your career goals, to be exact? And wrapping that all up is, how can we assist you in creating like an authentic space for yourself? Because I'm all about authenticity and what it means to be authentic, and it kind of goes to a different story, but I don't want to share it, right now. But
Hmm.
really being in a place where people can be authentic and be their true selves, and being
Right.
able to um, bring their whole selves to their space, whether it be work, whether it be school, things like that, and then aligning that with their values as well.
Okay, everybody, you heard Marquise say that we need to come together. We need to reach those people who are in need of guidance, support, you name it, to meet their goals. And if that means we have to get on the phone and call Marquise and say, hey, I have some resources for you because I need these students to be their real self. Everybody has to be their real self because we can't be anybody else. What's the old saying? I can't be nobody else because it's taken. Okay, you have to be yourself.
Exactly.
And so I want to encourage everybody to just really, when you listen to these podcasts, these people are coming from a place of sincerity. They're coming here not to sell you anything, but just to let you know of the services and the advocacy that they are fighting for. And so with that, we can take that resource or that knowledge and we can build something, this community that I'm trying to build here with everybody that can network, and not only network, collaborate and patron, so that we can have a stronger community. So I'm encouraging everybody to check out his page, read his bio, call him up on the phone. Also, look at all the other pages. Also, listen to all the other podcasts because these folks are here to answer your questions and to network with you. And with that, Marquise Taylor, I'd like to thank you for being on the podcast today.